Hello guys and welcome. In this lecture we'll explore the world of malware. We will define what malware is and what it can do. Then we'll have a look at different malware types such as viruses, worms, botnets, ransomware and many others. We'll discuss their capabilities, subtypes and provide some concrete examples. Finally, we'll delve into a malware matrix in order to better understand the similarities and differences between them. Welcome to the malware lecture. Let's dive in. So what is malware? The term malware is a combination of the words malicious and software. Basically, it's any software intentionally designed to cause damage to the software and/or hardware of a computer or a computer network. Of course, when I'm saying computers, I'm referring to a wide range of devices, from microcontrollers, wearables, such as smartwatches, to mobile phones, tablets, consoles, personal PCs, servers, and so on. What can malware do? Depending on the purpose for which the malware was built, it can do one or more of the following things. Some malware can tamper or even destroy data. In some rare cases, malware can even damage or destroy hardware. It can make systems vulnerable by creating backdoors that can be then used by even more malware. In some cases, malware can install other malware. It can generate spam or create denial-of-service attacks. It can also deplete the resources of the system and use these resources for malicious purposes, such as denial-of-service attacks. Last on our list, malware can be used to spy on users, extracting confidential information about the users. In this lecture, we'll have a look at 8 of the most common types of malware: virus, worm, Trojan horse, malicious bot, ransomware, spyware, adware, and rootkit. So let's start with the most widely known malware, the virus. The easiest way to understand a computer virus is to make a parallel with a biological virus. Let's take COVID for example. COVID, like any other virus, needs a host so that it can replicate itself. In order for someone to get infected, some kind of interaction with an infected person needs to happen. Like for example a handshake, staying in close proximity without a mask, or touching something that the infected person touched. Once the virus gets inside the person's system, it attaches itself to healthy human cells and uses these cells to create other instances of the virus, infecting even more cells. A computer virus is a malicious program or code which works in pretty much the same way. First, a computer virus requires a host program which it needs to infect. For example, a computer virus could infect the operating system, such as for instance Windows. Second, a computer virus requires user action to transmit itself from one system to another. Viruses cannot spread without some sort of action from a user, like for example opening an infected Word document. And third, similar to a biological virus, a computer virus infects other programs, inserting its malicious code. Now that we know what a virus is, let's have a look at some types of viruses. First, we have the polymorphic virus. A polymorphic virus changes its code each time it replicates itself. It does this to evade detection by antivirus programs. Because of this reason, modern viruses are usually polymorphic. Next, we have the boot sector virus. This type of virus is triggered whenever the victim starts their computer. After that, we have the file infector virus, which inserts malicious code into executable files such as for example media player, Word, Excel, or the operating system. Another type is the browser hijacker, which alters certain web browser functions. The altered functions could for example automatically direct the user to a malicious website. Next on the list, we have the resident virus. This type of virus inserts itself as part of the operating system and is loaded in the RAM memory whenever the operating system loads. Next, we'll discuss about direct action virus. This type of virus is triggered when the user executes a file containing the virus. Otherwise, the virus remains dormant. Yet another type is the macro virus. Macro viruses are written in the same macro language used for software applications such as Word, PowerPoint, or Excel. This type of viruses spread when the victim opens an infected document, which often spread via email attachments. Last on our list is the multipartite virus. This kind of virus infects and spreads in multiple ways. For example, such a virus can infect both document files as well as operating system files. Another famous type of malware is the computer worm. What exactly is a worm? A computer worm is a standalone malicious program that self-replicates in order to spread to other computers. A worm can replicate itself without any human interaction and is a standalone program. So, a worm does not need a host. Let's have a quick look at some worm types grouped by means of spreading. First type is internet worms. Internet worms scan the network using infected computers in order to find other vulnerable computers. If such a computer is found, the worm will then attempt to connect and infect the vulnerable machine. Next, we have email worms, which spread through email messages which contain malicious attachments or links to malicious websites. Yet another type is instant messaging worms, which spread by sending malicious links via instant messaging applications. Last on our list is the file-sharing network worms, which place a copy of themselves in a shared folder and spread via peer-to-peer network. Let's also have a brief look at a concrete computer worm example, Stuxnet. Stuxnet is a computer worm first discovered in 2010. It targeted the programmable logic controllers, which are industrial control systems used for industrial processes such as the centrifuges used for separating nuclear material. Stuxnet exploited several zero-day vulnerabilities in Windows and infected over 200,000 computers. It is reported that Stuxnet caused over 1,000 machines to physically degrade, ruining almost 1/5 of Iran's nuclear centrifuges. Next, we'll discuss the Trojan horse malware. Similar to the Trojan horse of the ancient Greek story, a Trojan horse or a Trojan is a deceptive malware which misleads the user of its true intent. Trojans usually spread through social engineering, for example through malicious email attachments or from malicious websites. As opposed to viruses and worms, Trojans do not attempt to propagate themselves. Let's explore some Trojan types. First on our list, we have the backdoor Trojan, which gives malicious users remote control over the infected computer. Depending on the Trojan, this enables cybercriminals to do things like send, receive, and delete files, launch programs, or display data. Backdoor Trojans are often used to create botnets that can be used for cybercriminal purposes. Another type that's running on the victim's computer. Next on our list is the Trojan Banker, which, as you already probably guessed from the name, is designed to steal credit card information or the credentials for online banking systems. Yet another type is the Trojan Distributed Denial of Service, or Trojan DDoS, which is used to conduct denial of service attacks against targeted web applications. You will learn more about denial of service attacks in another lecture. Now, let's talk about the Trojan Downloader and the Trojan Dropper. These Trojans are used to install other malware in the infected machine, such as other Trojans or viruses. The Trojan Downloader basically downloads and installs other malware, while the Trojan Dropper contains other malware source code embedded inside of it. The Dropper uses embedded source code to install new malware on the infected computer. Next, we have the Trojan Fake Antivirus, which pretends to be legitimate antivirus software. They are usually designed to obtain money from their victim in return for detection and removal of threats, even though the threats that they report are actually non-existent. After that, let's have a look at the Trojan Ransom. This type of Trojan can modify data on the victim's computer so that the victim cannot use the data anymore. The cybercriminals will only restore the data after ransom money is paid. Last on our list is the Trojan Spy, which, as the name implies, spies on the victim. For example, it can do that by tracking the data entered via the keyboard, taking screenshots, or getting a list of the running applications. Let's move on to the next malware, the malicious bot. First, in order to define what a malicious bot is, we have to know what a bot is. A bot is a software application that runs automated and repetitive tasks. The most common use of bots is web crawling, in which bots gather information from the web. Another type of bots are chatbots, which are used more and more recently. These kind of bots are often used by organizations to automate part of the support offered to customers. Okay, Now that we know what a bot is, we can have a look at the malicious bot. As the name implies, it's a bot used for malicious purposes. Malicious bots are usually self-propagating malware that infects computers. These bots then are used for cybercriminal activities. Multiple computers infected with malicious bots can form a bot network called botnet. Botnets can have different types of architectures. Some of the first botnets use the client-server architecture, in which the bots act as clients and connect to a server also known as command and control center. The command and control center then issues commands to the bots execute the commands and relay the results back to the command and control center. We can see an example of a client-server architecture on the top right part of the slide. In the middle we have the server, the command and control center, and around it we have the clients, the bot-infected computers. The main disadvantage of this type of botnet architecture is that if the command and control center is compromised, the whole botnet can be potentially shut down, since the control center issues commands to the whole botnet. A more resilient architecture is peer-to-peer. These botnets do not have a centralized server, and each bot behaves both as client, which receives commands, and as server, which issues commands. How does this work? One way can be as follows. Each bot searches the network for other bots, adding them to a contact list when found. The owner of the botnet can issue commands from one of the bots, and then the bot spreads the command to its known contacts. Then each of the contacts spreads the command further on. In order to make sure that the commands are genuine, the owner of the botnet can use a secret key to digitally sign the commands. This way, the bots can verify that the command is indeed genuine. We can see an example of a peer-to-peer botnet in the bottom right part of the slide. Each computer in the diagram is infected with a bot. In the diagram, we can see that we don't have the central server anymore and that each bot has several connections to other bots in the botnet. Now, let's explore some malicious bot types. First, we have the spam bots, which, as the name implies, are designed to propagate spam emails or messages. Another type is distributed denial of service bots or DDoS bots, which are used to initiate distributed denial of service attacks against specific targets. You will learn more about this type of attack in the denial of service lecture. Next on our list is registration bots. These bots use specific email addresses to sign the victim up to numerous services in order to flood their email inbox. This can be used to distract from important messages such as a security breach. Now, let's talk about malicious website scrapers. Besides legitimate purposes, website scrapers can also be used maliciously. For example, malicious website scrapers can be used to obtain the content of websites in order to create malicious copies of said websites. Related to this, there are bots that scrap the internet for information about individuals. For example, such a bot could scrap information from social media such as LinkedIn and Facebook so that cybercriminals can use this information to prepare spear phishing attacks. Other types of bots can open backdoors on the infected computers so that even more malware can be installed. Last on our list, we have viewbots, which are used to generate fake views, comments, and likes on the internet. As a concrete example of a botnet and a Trojan, we will talk about Emotet. Emotet is a malware which was first detected in 2014. It started as a banking Trojan that was designed to steal banking credentials. Emotet evolved into a downloader Trojan used to install other malware. Then, Emotet was also configured as a botnet, delivering malware as a service to cybercriminals. The cybercriminals using Emotet could, for example, obtain banking credentials of victims using malware or install ransomware on infected computers. Emotet spread through spam emails. The emails contained infected attachments such as malicious Word documents that contained the malware. Recently, it even used the fear of COVID to spread itself via spam emails, pretending to educate victims about COVID. Emotet was one of the most active and dangerous threats up until recently. Emotet has suffered a major disruption in January 2021 after a major collaborative effort from international police. Police has captured several hundred servers around the world which were used to manage infected computers, spread the malware, serve cybercriminal groups, and improve Emotet. Next on the malware list is ransomware. Ransomware is a type of malware that threatens its victims with blocking access to their data or threatens them with publishing confidential data on the internet unless a ransom is paid to the attackers. The most common types of ransomware are encrypting ransomware, non-encrypting ransomware, and exfiltration. The encrypting ransomware basically encrypts the victim's data, making it unavailable to anyone. Then, the cybercriminals behind the ransomware ask for a ransom in order to provide the decryption key to the victim. Using the decryption key, in theory, the victim can decrypt the data and have access to it again. However, be aware that even if the victim pays, there is no guarantee that the cybercriminals will actually provide the decryption key. The second type is non-encrypting ransomware, also known as scareware. This is a less dangerous malware, which just pretends that it has encrypted the victim's data. For example, such scareware can display an image on the victim's computer saying that the files have been encrypted by ransomware. This would be done in order to scare the victim into paying the ransom. However, in case of scareware, the victim's data is still intact. Last type is exfiltration or leakware. This type of ransomware threatens to leak online personal data of the victim, such as, for instance, private pictures or private conversations, unless a ransom is paid. However, similar to encrypting ransomware, the victim has no guarantee that the attacker won't leak the data anyway. Let's have a quick look at a concrete example of ransomware. WannaCry is an encrypting ransomware which was first discovered in May 2017. WannaCry is an encrypting ransomware which was first discovered in May 2017. It spread through the internet using an exploit named Eternal Blue, which targeted Windows operating systems. The Eternal Blue exploit was allegedly leaked from the US National Security Agency. Even though Microsoft released a patch in March 2017 that fixed the vulnerability exploited by WannaCry, in May 2017, WannaCry still spread to over 230,000 unpatched computers around the world. You can see on the left side a picture with the countries affected by the initial WannaCry attack. The affected countries are colored in red. WannaCry impacted many companies and organizations, such as the Spanish telecom Telefónica and the British National Health Service, impacting multiple hospitals which had to turn away patients and cancel scheduled operations. WannaCry also impacted FedEx, Deutsche Bahn, Honda, Renault, the Russian Interior Ministry and the Russian telecom Megafon. The original attack of WannaCry was stopped a few days later after a kill switch was found which prevented WannaCry from spreading further. Next, we'll talk about spyware. Spyware is malware that infects devices in order to gather information about its victims. For instance, depending on the spyware, it can gather information such as credentials to different websites, browser history, list of applications installed, emails sent and received, the input introduced from the keyboard, or credit card information. Next on our list is adware. Adware stands for Advertising Supported Software and is basically software that is designed to generate ads. Adware can also encourage users to install additional software promoted by third-party users. Adware is not necessarily malware. It can be used in legitimate use cases in which developers obtain extra income from ads. These ads can be embedded in their websites or applications. There are also other types of adware which can be potentially unwanted applications. First, we have legal but abusive or deceptive adware. This type of adware might make it difficult for the user to opt out of installing additional software. Also, in this category we might have adware which displays ads that might redirect to malicious websites. In these cases, the creator of the adware might not be aware of the malicious third-party ads. Another type of abusive but legal adware is adware that produces excessive ads. An example of such adware can be a browser toolbar that bombards you with ads. Finally, we have illegal malicious adware, in which the adware intentionally distributes malware or links to malicious websites. This type of adware is often accompanied by spyware. Last on our list is rootkit. The term rootkit is a combination of the word root, which is the name of privileged account in Unix-like operating systems, and the word kit, which refers to the collection of software that implements a tool. A rootkit is a set of software tools used to gain privileged access or control over a host. It is usually classified as malware since it is often used for malicious purposes. Malicious rootkits are designed to stay hidden and conceal themselves as well as other malware. There are, however, some legitimate utilities using rootkits. For example, some applications that emulate hardware or software, or some applications that are used to detect cheating in online games. With that, we conclude the exploration of different malware types. Before we wrap up, let's have a look at the malware matrix. You might have already noticed that some types of malware can overlap. To better understand the relations between different malware types learned today, we will explore the following malware matrix. A virus cannot be a worm. Why? Because a virus requires a host, while a worm, which is a standalone program, does not. A virus cannot be a Trojan either, because a virus can replicate itself while a Trojan cannot. Besides that, a virus can be a malicious bot, ransomware, spyware, adware, and finally, can use a rootkit to gain privileged access and/or conceal itself. Next, let's have a look at the computer worm. As we discussed, it cannot be a virus. Also, a worm cannot be a Trojan horse, because a worm can self-replicate while a Trojan cannot. Again, besides that, a worm can be any other type of malware, such as a bot, ransomware, spyware, adware, and similarly to the virus, it can use a rootkit to gain privileged access. After the worm, let's talk about Trojan. As we already mentioned, a Trojan cannot be a virus or a worm, but similarly to the worm and virus, it can be other types of malware such as bot, ransomware, spyware, adware, and rootkit. Next on the matrix, we have the malicious bot, which can also be any other type of malware. After that, we have ransomware, which similarly can be any other type of malware. One small note for ransomware. While technically possible, it does not make much sense for a ransomware to also be an adware. Next, we have spyware, which can also be any other type of malware discussed today. After that, we have a look at adware. Similarly, it can be any other type of malware discussed today, with the note that for adware, it does not make much sense to also be ransomware. Last, we have the rootkit, which can be used by any other type of malware discussed today in order to gain privileged access and/or conceal the malware. I hope that after discussing this matrix, you now have a better understanding of relationships between different types of malware discussed today. To recap, in this lecture we learned what malware is, what it can do, we explored the most common types of malware, looking at their capabilities and some concrete examples. Finally, we had a look at the malware matrix to better understand the relationship between different types of malware. With that, we conclude this lecture. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask us. See you soon in the next lecture.
Hello guys and welcome to our DDoS chapter. In this lecture we will learn what a denial of service and a distributed denial of service attack is, and we will explore some examples together.
DOS and DDoS attacks. First of all, what are these acronyms? A DOS, a denial of service attack, tries to make a web resource unavailable to its users by flooding the target URL with more requests than the server can handle. That means during the attack period, regular traffic on the, for example, website will be either slowed down or completely interrupted. A DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack, is a DOS attack from more than one resource at the same time. A DDoS attack is typically generated using thousands, even hundreds of thousands, of unsuspecting zombie devices. These machines are collectively known as botnets and will have been previously infected with malicious software so that they can be remotely controlled by the attacker. It is currently estimated that worldwide, millions of computers are at this point infected with botnet programs. But let's see how all this works. We'll take a classic example with our hacker Eve and the unsuspecting Bob, who is the owner of a small online shop. Eve wants to take Bob's shop down and she's planning to use a HTTP flood to accomplish it. An HTTP flood is an attack similar to pressing, let's say, refresh in a web browser over and over on many different computers at once. Large numbers of HTTP requests flood the server, resulting in a denial of service. Of course, this type of attack ranges from simple to complex. Simpler implementations may access one URL with the same range of attacking IP addresses, referrers, and user agents. Complex versions may use a large number of attacking IP addresses and target random URLs using random referrers and user agents. Now let's go a bit deeper in our example. Let's imagine you make a bunch of requests. And if a real customer wants to access Bob's shop, he/she will not be able because Eve's bots are overloading the servers. Since it's probably not very clear how this works, let's imagine you have a small physical shop and I send 50 fake customers at the same time to enter your shop. And then there is another real customer that wants to enter and buy, but he or she will need to wait for a long time or maybe not even make it inside the shop. HTTP flood works in a very similar way, where the server where Bob's shop is hosted can only serve a maximum number of simultaneous requests, and if Eve's bots reach that limit, the shop will not be available for the actual real customers. Types of attacks. Here we have 5 main categories. Since they are quite complex, in the description you may find some words that you're not familiar with. For you, we're going to explain all those terms in the notes together with some links with further information. First, HTTP flood. This was the attack from our example and we're not going to spend some extra time on it. In big lines, this translates into a large number of HTTP requests that flood the server or servers, resulting in a denial of service. Second, protocol attacks. Also known as a state exhaustion attack. This causes a service disruption by consuming all the available state table capacity of web application servers or intermediate resources like firewalls and load balancers. Protocol attacks utilizes weaknesses in layer 3 and layer 4 of the protocol stack to render the target inaccessible. Third, SIN flood is an analog to a worker in a supply room receiving requests from the front of the store. The worker receives a request, goes and gets the package and waits for the confirmation before bringing the package out in front. The worker then gets many more package requests without confirmation until they can't carry any more packages, becoming overwhelmed, and requests start going unanswered. Fourth, volumetric attacks. This category of attacks attempts to create congestion by consuming all available bandwidth between the target and the larger internet. Large amounts of data are sent to a target by using a form of amplification or another means of creating massive traffic such as requests from a botnet. Fifth, a DNS amplification is like if someone were to call a restaurant and say, "I'll have one of everything, please call me back and tell me my whole order again," where the callback phone number they give is the target's number. With very little effort, a long response is generated. This concludes our lecture. You will find the links with further information in the DDoS text file from the resource section. Thank you and see you soon in our next chapter.
Hello guys and welcome to the brute force lecture. In this section we will learn what brute force is and what are the type of attacks used by hackers. In the second part we will learn how secure passwords really are, some best practices and a small workshop to test passwords. Let's dive into it.
Brute force attacks. Well, first of all, what is it? A brute force attack is an attempt using trial and error to crack a password, a username, find a hidden URL, an encryption key, and so on. It's probably not very clear, so let's see a simple example from the non-digital world. We have this lock that has 10,000 maximum combinations. This means that if we try them one by one, we will eventually find the right key that unlocks it. Imagine that this is your password. That, of course, has many more possible combinations, but instead of having two hands, we have quite some advanced computing power that can calculate possible solutions at a very high rate. This is a very simple example of how trial and error works and how to crack a lock, but let's get back to our digital world and see what types of brute force attacks are out there. We have 6 main categories. The first one is a simple brute force attack. This uses a systematic approach to guess that doesn't rely on outside logic. Second, hybrid brute force attacks. This starts from the external logic to determine which password variation may be most likely used to succeed, and then continues with a simple approach to try many possible variations. Third, dictionary attacks. This guesses usernames or passwords using a dictionary of possible strings or phrases. Fourth, rainbow table attacks. A rainbow table is a pre-computed table for reversing cryptographic hash functions. It can be used to guess a function up to a certain length consisting of a limited set of characters. 5. Reverse brute force attack. This uses a common password or collection of passwords against many possible usernames. Targets a network of users for which the attackers have previously obtained data. 6. Credential stuffing. Uses previously well-known password username pairs, trying them against multiple websites. Exploits the fact that many users have the same username and password across different systems. Now that you have an idea about what brute force is and what are the types of attacks, let's get back to some scenarios that you can apply as a home user. We will next see how you can secure your passwords and how you can protect against possible attacks. How secure is a password? This is the average computer time on which a password can be brute forced. And this is quite interesting because a simple password like admin can be roughly cracked in around 8 seconds. But a complex password that has multiple types of characters can take up to some months or even centuries. And now let's see, based on this, what are the best practices. We compiled a list of 6 recommendations that we wanted to give you. First, use a password manager. This will actually help you for the other 5 items from our list. We're going to leave in the brute force document from the resources a link with all the free and paid password managers. Second, use a minimum password length of 20 or more characters if permitted. Third, include lowercase and uppercase alphabetical characters, numbers, and symbols if permitted. Fourth, generate passwords randomly when possible. Here is also where the password manager can help, since they can generate passwords based on different options that you can select. Fifth, avoid using the same password twice, across multiple user accounts and/or software systems. As we saw earlier, if a database is hacked and your username and password combination is there, the hackers will try those combinations on multiple platforms to see if they get a match. Sixth, avoid character repetition, keyboard patterns, dictionary words, letters, or numbers sequences. Avoid using information that the user's colleagues and/or acquaintances might know to be associated with the user, such as relatives, pet names, romantic links, and biographical information. And now that you have all this information, let's have a fun workshop. Go to the link in the slide and play with passwords to see how fast you can brute force them. However, we don't recommend you using your real passwords. Try to keep it safe. And with this, we conclude our brute force lesson. We hope that we provided some interesting information, and please find the links discussed here in the brute force text file from the resource section. Thank you, and see you soon in our next chapter.
Hello guys and welcome. In this lecture we'll have a look at one of the most common types of attack, phishing. We'll start with the definition, then we'll explore some common types and analyze common features of phishing. Finally, we'll discuss how you can protect yourself against phishing. Welcome to the lecture about phishing. So let's start. Phishing is a fraudulent attempt to obtain sensitive information by impersonating a trustworthy entity. The sensitive information can range from usernames and passwords to credit cards details or other confidential information. You probably received emails upon emails telling you that you have won some big prize in a contest you never enrolled to, or that you have to give some money to a Nigerian prince and that he will pay you back handsomely. These are just a couple of examples of phishing. Now that we know what phishing is, let's explore some techniques used for phishing. First, we have spear phishing. This type of phishing attack targets a specific person that was previously analyzed in detail. Whaling is a very similar attack that usually targets C-level executives, senior managers, or people that have access to specific areas, such as, for example, people performing financial transactions. Another type of attack is catfishing, wherein a deceptive person creates a fictional online persona for the purpose of luring someone into a relationship with the intent of gaining access to confidential information and/or restricted resources. Next, we have clone phishing, which is a type of attack in which a previously delivered email that contains an attachment or a link is used to create a new, almost identical malicious email. The attachment or link within the cloned email is replaced with a malicious version, and that email is sent from a spoofed email address to appear as if it was sent by the original sender. It may claim to be a resend or just an updated version of the original email. Usually this type of phishing requires that either the sender or the recipient was previously hacked so that the malicious third party can obtain the original version of the email. After clone phishing, we'll talk about angler phishing. This is a specific type of phishing attack that exists on social media. Cybercriminals create fake social media accounts that try to mimic accounts of companies. These fake accounts can emulate, for example, the customer support of a company. So, for example, when a customer would make a complaint about the service of the company, the fraudsters could try to redirect him to a malicious website or try to obtain his credentials to, for example, between codes, solve the complaint. Last but not least, we have search engine phishing. This method is using malicious websites which are optimized for certain keywords, so that they appear as one of the first results when searching for a particular keyword, such as, for example, online shop, on search engines such as, let's say, Google. The user, seeing the malicious website as one of the first results, might open the website, and fraudsters then might trick the user into giving confidential information such as credit card information or credentials. We've seen phishing types grouped by technique. Now let's have a look at different phishing types grouped by the medium used. First, the most common type of phishing is email phishing. You probably receive phishing emails almost every day. Another popular way is using fraudulent websites. Those websites try to trick their users into giving confidential information. Next type we'll talk about is evil twin. This phishing attack targets Wi-Fi access points. Basically, an evil twin is a fraudulent Wi-Fi access point that appears to be legitimate, but actually is used to eavesdrop on communication. Similar to other phishing types, it is used to obtain confidential information of users by either monitoring their connection or by luring them to fraudulent websites. Yet another type is voice phishing, which refers to phishing done via audio calls such as normal phone calls or WhatsApp, Skype, or other calls. Last type that we'll discuss today is smishing. Smishing or SMS phishing refers to phishing attempts done using messaging systems such as the classic SMS or newer messaging systems such as WhatsApp or Skype. Even though we already saw that phishing attacks can be quite varied, phishing usually shares some common features that we should look out for. Be suspicious of any email, message, website, or call that has any of the following features. Phishing usually contains some too good to be true statements. For example, many claim that you have won some big prize like a car, a smartphone, or the lottery, or that you can buy something expensive like, for example, a house or a boat for a very cheap price. Another tactic used is intimidation. Many phishing scams make all kinds of unrealistic threats, such as saying that your account will close soon and that you have to act quickly to stop that. Other common statements are all kinds of blackmail attempts, such as threatening to leak private information such as pictures unless you react. Next on our list, we have sense of urgency. Almost all phishing scams rely on a sense of urgency. For example, a lot of them are saying that you can get the price or that unbelievable deal for a very limited amount of time, or that your account will be closed in a short period of time unless you react. Whenever you receive such communication, be extra suspicious and never take rash decisions. Another feature is that there is always a catch. For example, you receive an email saying that you can get your awesome price or awesome offer if you first send some money for expenses and fees. This is usually a sign of a phishing attempt. Next, we have deceptive links and attachments. We have to pay extra attention to emails that contain links or attachments. Fraudsters tend to use links that are either misspelled or dodgy in order to trick their victims into going on fraudulent websites. Also, be careful. The hyperlink displayed in the email might not be the actual link that you will be redirected to. To check the actual value of the hyperlink, hover over the link. Whenever in doubt, just go manually on the website of the organization. Regarding attachments, if you see an attachment that you weren't expecting or that doesn't make sense, don't open it. Attachments can often contain malware. Yet another common feature of phishing is having an unusual sender. Always pay attention to the sender, and don't trust emails or messages sent from senders that look dodgy or, if anything, seems unusual, such as, for example, a character which is out of place in the sender's name and/or address. Next on our list, we have poor spelling. Many phishing attacks usually impersonate well-known companies or organizations. However, many times you can find multiple grammar mistakes and spelling errors. This is a sign of phishing attempt, as big organizations would not distribute messages with such mistakes. The last feature on our list is asking for sensitive information. Fraudsters usually try to obtain personal information. If you receive an email asking you to give credentials or other sensitive information, don't reply to it. Now let's test our knowledge and see how many phishing features we can find in these examples. You can pause the video here and look for clues. Ready? Let's start. First, let's check the sender. Let's say that someone important looks like someone we can trust. But if we check the organization, we see a typo. Let's continue and have a look when it was sent. It was sent on a Saturday at 4 AM in the morning, on Christmas night to be precise. This is also another thing that looks quite suspicious on its own. Okay, so let's continue. Let's have a look at the subject. Urgent action needed, with 3 exclamation marks, which definitely shows urgency, which, as we remember, is also a potential feature of phishing, especially when combined with the fact that the email was sent on Christmas night. Let's also have a look at the body. Dear customer, your account will be deleted in 24 hours. Please access the following link to revert this action. Then we have the actual link, yourbank.yourbbbank.com. Again, we see the sense of urgency coming up, giving us only 24 hours to react. We also have a URL here, and at first sight, it seems that it's from our favorite bank. But if we look a bit closer, we see something strange. Your bank is just a subdomain of the actual domain, which is a misspelled version of your bank with double B. So another red flag. Let's continue reading the body. Also, download the attachment Learning how to reduce loan rate and loan amount by 75%. We have 3 more signs that this is a phishing attack. First, spelling and grammar mistakes. Second, there's an offer that is too good to be true. Last but not least, we also have an attachment, which if we have a closer look to, we see that it's also an executable. So yet another red flag. Before we wrap up this lecture, let's see briefly how we can protect ourselves against phishing attacks. First, always take your time and think before you click. Look at features of phishing, and if you find any, don't click on any link and do not download any attachment. Second, never provide information such as credentials, personal data, or credit card information. Besides that, use antivirus software. Having antivirus software installed might protect you in case you get infected with malware in the unfortunate case that you open an attachment from a phishing email. Another thing that would help you protect yourself is keeping your software up to date. This refers to your operating system, browser, application, basically everything. Often the malware sent by fraudsters takes advantage of vulnerabilities from older, unpatched versions of software. So keeping your software up to date will make it harder for hackers to harm you. Last but not least, check the website security. If you click on a link from an email, always check that it is indeed the genuine website that you actually wanted to use, especially if you want to provide credentials or credit card information. Besides that, you should also check that the URL begins with HTTPS, and if you have any doubts, check the security certificate as well. You'll learn how to check the website certificate in the How to Protect Yourself lecture. That being said, in this lecture we learned what phishing is, we explored different types of phishing, discussed some common features of phishing, and tested our knowledge with an example. Finally, we had a quick look at how to protect ourselves against phishing. With that, we conclude this lecture. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask us. See you soon in the next lecture.